It started with a single, simple package and became a global empire that redefined commerce forever. How Amazon became a trillion-dollar company.
Okay, I want you to picture this. It's the year 1994. There's this highly successful executive working at a really prestigious investment firm right in the heart of New York City. He's got the secure, high-paying job, he's on that fast track to the corner office, and he has the exact kind of financial stability that most people spend their entire lives striving for. But then, one day, he stumbles across this single, staggering statistic. Internet usage was growing at a rate of 2,300% a year. Let that sink in for a second. 2,300%. This wasn't just some bump in dial-up connectivity, right? This was a completely unprecedented explosion in human history. He realized instantly that this was absolutely not just another passing tech trend. No, this was the dawn of an entirely new era of commerce. So instead of playing it safe and staying on Wall Street, he makes one of the most drastic, frankly, terrifying decisions of his life. He resigns from his incredibly lucrative firm, packs up all his belongings, and literally drives across the United States to Seattle just to chase this digital ghost. And you know what? That cross-country drive set the absolute perfect stage for a company that would completely rewire the modern world. What began on that quiet road trip out west soon evolved into this epic, almost unbelievable battle between a visionary's boundless ambition and the brutal, incredibly complex realities of scaling a global empire. And today, in this explainer, we are tracing that exact journey. We're going to dive deep into the history, those quiet early milestones, the terrifying near collapses, and the astonishing behind-the-scenes innovations that somehow shaped a simple online bookstore into a massive global technology and logistics leviathan. This is really a story about that tension, the tension between what a company envisions for the future and the immense practical realities of actually building it from the ground up. So get comfortable because we're jumping right in. Chapter 1. The Internet Opportunity, the 1994 Spark. So, during that incredibly long drive to Seattle, Jeff Bezos wasn't just, listening to the radio and watching the scenery go by. He was feverishly drafting the initial business plan for what would eventually become Amazon. He was deeply convinced that the internet was this massive, completely untapped frontier. But when he finally got that plan together, he faced one really major, highly practical question. Where exactly do you start? The answer, surprisingly, was pure logistics. Think about a traditional physical bookstore for a second. No matter how cavernous or massive the building is, it is fundamentally bound by its own architecture. It has limited shelf space, which makes it physically impossible to stock all the millions of book titles currently in print. But the internet offered something totally revolutionary: limitless capacity. Because there are no physical shelves to build, an online store could offer a massive, completely unparalleled selection of inventory to anyone with a connection. So books were chosen not out of some deep, poetic passion for literature. Nope. They were picked because they were the absolute perfect commodity to prove the superiority and the massive scale of internet retail. By July of 1995, the startup officially launched, right out of a tiny, unassuming garage. In those incredibly early days, the whole system was actually so rudimentary that they programmed a physical bell to ring in the office every single time an order was placed. The team would literally gather around the computer just to see if anyone happened to know the customer. It's kind of hilarious to think about now, because within just a few weeks, that bell was ringing so constantly, so relentlessly, that they actually had to disconnect it because it was driving everyone crazy. Orders were just pouring in from all across the United States, and very soon, from all around the world. And driving this explosive early growth was a singular, obsessive mission statement: to become Earth's most customer-centric company. Every single logistical hurdle they faced, every late night spent sitting on the floor packing cardboard boxes by hand, it was all rooted entirely in this philosophy of serving the buyer better than anyone else possibly could. Chapter 2. Growing beyond books, becoming the everything store. Now, as wildly successful as the bookstore was, it was actually only ever a Trojan horse for a much larger, far more ambitious strategy. The ultimate goal wasn't just books. The goal was to sell absolutely everything. And so the company unleashed this absolute blitzkrieg of expansion. First, they aggressively moved into music and movies. Then they rapidly conquered electronics, toys, home products, and eventually even fashion. This transition was, to put it mildly, a logistical nightmare. Critics loudly and very publicly laughed at the idea. They were wondering how on earth a single warehouse system could seamlessly handle the delicate shipping of a fragile flat-screen television right alongside heavy, bulky power tools. The diversification was so vast and it happened so incredibly fast that a lot of financial analysts out there genuinely believed the company was simply trying to do way too much, way too quickly. But the founder had a very different philosophy, and it was one that directly clashed with the traditional demands of Wall Street. You see, throughout the late 90s, analysts were practically begging the company to show a standard quarterly profit. They wanted immediate gains. They wanted to see the money now. Instead, Bezos famously wrote in his shareholder letters that long-term market leadership heavily outweighed short-term profitability. The company ruthlessly ignored the demand for immediate financial returns. They chose instead to plow every single dime they made right back into massive warehouse expansion, cutting-edge software development, and building faster delivery networks. That core philosophy of delaying immediate gratification in order to build massive future scale, that became their defining armor.
Chapter 3. Surviving the dot-com crash, the year 2000 crisis.
And boy, were they going to need that armor, because it was about to be put to the ultimate test. As the world entered the year 2000, the atmosphere in the tech world shifted overnight from euphoric to just utterly terrifying. The internet bubble violently burst. Almost instantly, trillions of dollars in market value simply evaporated into thin air. Hundreds of high-flying technology companies completely collapsed, leaving investors absolutely ruined. Amazon's own stock plummeted from over $100 a share to under $6. Let that drop sink in. Major financial publications actually ran cover stories calling the company Amazon.bomb, predicting it would be the very next monumental casualty of the crash. Between their heavy spending on infrastructure and their razor-thin profit margins, survival just looked mathematically impossible to anyone looking from the outside in. To survive what was arguably one of the most brutal periods in internet history, the company underwent a grueling, fundamental restructuring. Behind the scenes, they quietly and ruthlessly improved their operational efficiency. They had to figure out how to run their rapidly expanding warehouses leaner, smarter, and cheaper. Yet, crucially, and this is the important part, they absolutely refused to let this massive financial panic degrade the customer experience. They maintained that relentless, obsessive focus on the buyer. By surviving the crash through sheer operational grit and fighting to keep customers happy, they slowly, painstakingly began to regain the market's confidence. They essentially emerged from the ashes of the dot-com bust significantly stronger and with far fewer competitors left standing in their way. Chapter 4. The AWS Breakthrough. The 2006 Surprise Pivot. Having survived the crash, the company was heavily primed to innovate once again. But their biggest breakthrough? It actually had absolutely nothing to do with retail at all. It stemmed from a purely internal revelation. You see, to keep their own massive store running smoothly during peak holiday shopping seasons, they'd been forced to build this monumental, highly complex back-end computing infrastructure. And they suddenly realized that for most of the year, all that extra computing power was just sitting there, completely idle. So they made a genius move. They decided to package it up and rent it out over the internet. This birthed Amazon Web Services, effectively pioneering modern cloud computing as we know it today. Instead of a business having to go out and buy and maintain literal rooms full of expensive physical computer servers, they could just rent that computing power on demand, exactly when they needed it. The adoption of this service was nothing short of a quiet revolution. Startups quickly realized they no longer needed millions of dollars in venture capital just to buy server racks. They could literally launch a global business from a laptop overnight. Large corporations gleefully began outsourcing massive chunks of their IT departments. Even highly secure government agencies started moving their immense data loads onto these servers. Independent developers embraced the flexibility almost immediately. So while the entire world was laser-focused on the retail store delivering cardboard boxes to their front porches, this invisible, back-end infrastructure quietly became one of the most wildly profitable divisions of the entire empire. It is really no exaggeration to say that this single pivot fundamentally reshaped the modern internet. To truly grasp the scale of this, just think about your own daily digital routine for a second. When you fire up a massive global streaming service to watch a movie tonight, or when you book a ride on a global rideshare app, or when you use complex financial software to check your bank account, you are very likely interacting directly with this exact cloud infrastructure. It acts as the unseen plumbing for vast, massive portions of the digital world. Literally, without it, the internet as we experience it today simply would not function the same way. Chapter 5. Redefining Global Commerce, Changing How the World Shops. While the back end of the internet was secretly being rewired, the retail side was heavily focused on consumer conditioning.
They were systematically trying to remove every single possible point of friction between a shopper and a purchase. Think about what they introduced. They rolled out one-click purchasing, which completely bypassed the mental hurdle of having to enter your credit card details every time. They built this massive global ecosystem of customer reviews to basically manufacture digital trust. Then came the introduction of the Prime membership, which fundamentally altered human psychology around waiting for goods. It completely changed our baseline expectations for shipping forever. Then came smart speakers, placing the storefront directly into our living rooms via voice command. They added streaming entertainment to keep us happily locked inside their ecosystem, and deployed incredibly powerful AI to recommend products to us before we even consciously realized we wanted them. It was a masterclass in consumer convenience. But delivering on that staggering promise of 2-day or now even 2-hour shipping, that required a complete reimagining of physical infrastructure. I want you to imagine a modern fulfillment center spanning millions of square feet. Inside, thousands of these little orange Kiva robots are performing a highly orchestrated dance across the floor, physically moving towering shelves of inventory directly to human packers. At the exact same time, artificial intelligence is constantly analyzing global purchasing trends, predicting inventory needs, and pre-positioning stock across this vast global network. What you're looking at is a brilliant, highly calibrated symphony of robotics, automation, AI, and incredibly complex logistics. All of it working in flawless tandem to move millions of physical packages across the globe every single day with frankly frightening efficiency.
Chapter 6: Challenges and Criticism: The Global Impact.
Now, operating at this kind of unprecedented global scale naturally invites some really profound and necessary public scrutiny. Whenever a single entity controls this much of the retail and digital landscape, intense conversations are bound to follow. And we've seen this. There's been intense public focus on the physical toll of warehouse workplace conditions, as well as really complex antitrust concerns regarding how a giant of this size impacts independent smaller businesses. There's also the undeniable environmental impact of running a massive global logistics network that moves physical goods around the clock, alongside growing public anxieties about digital privacy and the sheer societal influence of massive tech conglomerates. In response to this immense and continuous pressure, the company has heavily documented its ongoing investments in operational safety improvements. They've also launched sweeping, multi-billion-dollar renewable energy initiatives aimed at entirely offsetting their massive carbon footprint. And they remain very heavily involved in the continuing, incredibly complex global dialogue regarding their exact role and responsibilities in modern society.
The long-term vision: from garage to global giant.
Going from a tiny, cramped garage startup selling paperbacks to one of the most powerful technology and logistics empires in human history, well, this journey is about far more than just e-commerce. It is fundamentally a masterclass in vision, in brutal patience, and in a relentless dedication to long-term thinking that completely transformed industries the entire world thought were basically impossible to change. Their epic rise really reminds us that the most seismic shifts in our society often start with a very simple, quiet curiosity. They begin with just a single person looking at a completely established system and asking, what if there was a better way? It is a profound question, and for sure it's one worth asking in our own lives. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and make sure to turn on those notifications, because in our next episode, we are going to uncover another incredible story behind one of the world's most influential companies. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.